All right, so Mr. Ed.
Yes, Mr.
We're
Chris.
going to be talking about, we're going to be spoiler casting
Yes.
God of War Ragnarok.
Spoiler alert if the name didn't give it away.
Indeed. We're going to be talking about all the doings and happenings in this game's world.
All the things we've wanted to say during the last few weeks of casting but couldn't, just in case.
Yes, out of respect for our audience, out of respect for Gabe, who's getting there. He's like getting close to the finish line, but keeps getting tripped up and hasn't quite made it.
Yeah.
And then we all know Router's probably not going to play this game for about a year.
Right.
So it's going to take him a hot minute. He's still trucking on Elden Ring.
Yep.
Didn't he say something like, I think he's like 23 videos left, and those are like an hour-long videos, so basically a day's worth of gaming still left or something crazy.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we wanted to go ahead and get this out since you and I were done, and before it gets too far from our brains, where our old man brains are like, I don't remember, I got to replay kind of thing. So I had replayed 2018's God of War back in around May.
Okay.
And the game came out in October. Ragnarok, no, it came out in early November, right? Wasn't that the case? Somewhere around there, late October, early November. So
yeah.
For the context of how far back from then May was. And I kind of did that. I knew I wanted to replay the game, but a big part of it was I want to have fresh mind from the story, because the way that I understand it, at least from just interviews and things after the first one had ended and then marketing and whatnot, this game really was just going to be like a continuation. In fact, I think that we had even mentioned this somewhat on the podcast, that I had a little bit of concern. I was like, well, is it going to feel way too samey? Is it going to just not feel like an upgrade or a sequel or any of that kinds of stuff?
Yeah.
And I had someone, when they started dropping, not reviews, but like previews for this game.
Right.
I watched one person in particular, and he made this statement that I thought was really a really good way to put it, and it kind of put it in a good perspective for me, because I was excited about the game, but a little not concerned, even nervous about, like, is this just not going to feel like I'm not going to be wowed or something? Right. And he said, you need to not go into this thinking of this as a sequel. This is a continuation of the game. And he likened it to Kill Bill Volume 2 is not the sequel to Kill Bill in Volume 1. They're the same story, just told in two parts. They're delivered to you at separate times. Yeah. But they're the same story. And when he said that, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Because it's like I knew that, but I needed someone to verbalize it that way for it to really, like, bridge the gap in my mind of wanting, just being so used to, like, no, it needs to be a sequel, and it's got to be bigger and better and all that. Which there are a lot of ways, and we'll get to this, how it is bigger and better. But there's also a ton of ways where it's just very familiar. And I was just concerned, is that going to be a even though I greatly enjoyed the first game, was that going to be a problem? Was it going to feel like, oh man, this isn't all that great because I've already done this song and dance? Or was it going to feel like, oh yeah, I'm back in the saddle again and all this? Did you have any of those thoughts or fears or anything?
I think anytime there's a sequel to a game I really like, even though like Miles wasn't like a quote unquote sequel, Spider-Man was so good, I got a little nervous when they come out with another one. The Last of Us, anytime there's a game I like, I'm just a little nervous about, don't ruin this memory for me. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's probably a really good way to put it as well. I would say after I got into it pretty early on, any of my concerns, of course I did have that from that preview, that the way that guy had put it to kind of like sync it all together for me. But I feel like all my concerns just went away. Like, yes, there was definitely things that were very similar, but there was enough different and enough new stuff and a ton of stuff to where I was like, I'm just happy to be back in here and continuing on with the story and seeing how it unfolds and all that kinds of stuff. I didn't end up having any. Now, I had some other things that came up that I was a little miffed about. Right. But that's good story-wise, nothing. And even though you had recently replayed the first one, that's good that it didn't have that, more of this kind of, that's good that it wasn't too samey for you then. So, like, overall impression-wise, what are the things that you really enjoyed, and if there is anything at all, what's something that you were less than enthused about, if anything?
I went back a couple days ago and actually finished yesterday, and went on YouTube and watched a cutscenes only video just to kind of refresh, because I knew we were going to do this, and I wanted to see if there was anything I missed. And I told Sarah she would kind of pop in and out and ask questions about what was going on. And I would say, oh, you know what? Actually, I don't remember, because even though I played this off stream so I could focus on the story, when I've got that controller in my hand, for me at least, there's part of it of at any point we could go into me playing it again. So even though I'm able to focus on the story, I still missed a lot because I've got the controller in my hand and I'm kind of waiting on what's gonna come up next, kind of a thing. So even sitting back and watching just the YouTube video, I missed so much story-wise.
Yeah.
And understood a lot more, because when I'm in the moment, it's hard for me to capture. And sitting back and watching just the story, I enjoyed it so much more. Even though the gameplay was fun, I also didn't have the things in the gameplay that I found frustrating, that I had to deal with. In the first one, when he gets the blades, and there's that big reveal, I all of a sudden felt so much more powerful. And I didn't feel that way with the spear when that came out. And I kind of missed that moment of, oh, I'm so strong. I always felt like I was playing a little catch up. I was playing, I think, on normal difficulty. It may have even been story. I don't remember, but I just never had that moment of I feel super strong. I think Gabe mentioned that as well.
I'm totally in agreement with that, by the way. I feel like from the get-go, Kratos just didn't feel super strong. And if I hadn't just replayed 2018, I probably would feel like, oh, this isn't how it was. And I don't feel like in 2018, because I tried to really go back in my head. I was like, well, hang on a second. I just don't remember, even though I only played in May, like it starting that slow. I felt like even when I was low level, I still felt powerful.
Yeah. And
in this one, it wasn't like crazy, like that I felt way underpowered, but I just didn't have that oomph to my hits and my damage and everything that I was expecting for the low level people. And of course, as you mentioned, you know, building up your, upgrading your weapons and your armor and all these kinds of things and unlocking various abilities and whatnot, you kind of, you start to build that up. But even towards it wasn't till like, gosh, I'm talking end game, that I really felt like I was back to being destroyer of worlds, Kratos kind of thing. And even then, I still feel like it was a little stronger in the first one. And I don't know, I mean, I understand, or I can imagine that had to be like a concern that they had. Like, okay, well, you had all this stuff and you're still going to have some of the stuff, but we can't start you at like being infinitely powerful. You've got to, build, climb the ladder again, if you will. I just felt like it did take me a little bit too long to do that. And you mentioned the spear. So that was another thing that that was like a new weapon. That was kind of, I don't know. I guess I didn't see that weapon coming. I knew that there was going to be some kind of ring or something involved, only because you got a little version of it if you got the Jotnar Collector's Edition.
Oh, really? Okay.
So I knew that there was going to be some significance to some kind of ring, but I had no idea what it was.
Yeah.
And so when that happened, and then it was like, oh, it's another weapon. So what did you think about the spear, using the spear? By the time you got to the end of the game, how was the spear for you?
It took me a long time to even want to go to the spear. Just because I was so used to what I was already doing. And I've never, in any kind of game, Assassin's Creed or anything, I'm just not a spear user. This one was a lot easier for me to use than it was in another, like Assassin's Creed.
Yeah.
But, I thought it was cool. It just, for me, it took me a long time to get used to the different abilities each weapon had and switching back. And once I did, I felt comfortable. It was easy to switch to, but it took me a while to even want to switch around, I guess.
Yeah. So I initially was struggling a lot with the spear. Did not want to use it, not because it wasn't, I mean, it was kind of cool, but obviously when you first unlock it, is the weakest point that it's going to be.
Right.
I felt like my other weapons were stronger. And at the time I was rocking this armor where it was the Lunda armor set, the complete set. So your chest like piece has this ability or this perk on it, I guess, where and I may be getting these where it aligns a little bit off. But essentially, one of your armor pieces makes it to where when you do melee damage with bare-fisted, it gives them like poison damage.
Okay.
And then the gauntlets and or the I guess waist piece, I don't know, skirt, whatever you want to call it, that thing
right.
that Kratos is wearing, those in combination deal more damage against poisoned enemies. So I had this incentive to do a lot of bare-fisted fighting. And since I wasn't at this point really feeling, I felt like that was my strongest move during the game, especially with this armor, because again, the weapons just didn't feel quite like they were packing the punch that I was expecting. But if I switched to bare-handed, like I'm doing all this damage because, of these armor sets, like really working towards that ability. So then when you give me the spear, you push down on the D-pad, the spear comes out. You have to push down again to get rid of it. And when you're like in the thralls of combat and you're swapping weapons and trying to use their perks, and while you're building up the other one and trying to combo all this stuff, I kept trying to go to my bare fist and I couldn't do it well. In fact, that getting the spear and having it was the main thing that made me move away from using that armor set. And now this armor set was not necessarily meant to be like an end game armor set. Like you get it somewhere, you can earn it somewhere in the middle of the game, and it's a great mid game armor set. But once I got that spear, it's just like this armor is useless because it takes so long to get into the fight or to get into my bare-fisted form to where I can fight and to use the perks of it. That kind of bummed me out too, and I stopped using the spear out of protest. I was like, hey, you're messing up my game here, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then, as I started building up the spear and using it more, I found myself defaulting to it probably as my go-to, at least to start out with.
Yeah.
Because it just attacks so fast. And I had a couple runic attacks with it that were really strong, but they also had super long cooldowns. So I would start with the spear, do a bunch of damage, use my runic, and then switch to my other weapons while hopefully that was taking the time to build back up so that when I swapped back to it, it's ready to go, and I could throw, this crazy rain down of all these mythical spears, just decimating the bad guy.
Right.
So I ended up really liking it, and probably by the time we got to like end game, I was probably using the spear more than any weapon.
Really?
Unless it was, that's if I had just a normal enemy, because some enemies, they get hurt more by fire, or they get hurt more by, and so you kind of dictates what weapon's better to use against them. But if it was just like a normal enemy where I could choose whichever one, they'll do all the same amount of damage, I was using the spear way more than I did initially. So
how are you, like in the game, each weapon had a pretty extensive skill tree as far as like moves you could do, and I'm not a moves guy. I pretty much just did like light and heavy attacks with everything, and when I watched the story playthrough, it would include a couple of fights, and it was just impressive to watch because this guy's doing all these things that I just never did because I can't remember moves. How are you when it comes to something like that? Did you?
I don't know, and don't feel like I ever did any like combos.
Right.
They're just not something that really. I'm the same as you. Like I'm gonna use the abilities, and I'm gonna use the runic attacks, and I'm gonna. I mean, there's a move set, and this was in the first game too. But I feel like there's way more of these options in this one. For instance, I'll just talk about the Leviathan axe. There would be this move where, like, if you're fighting, and if you dodge, meaning you like, if you not so much dodge like try to block the attack, because blocking is different. So I just want to make sure I'm clear on there. But if you dodge or you back up, like you're evading their incoming attack, and you hit this button, you'll like throw your axe out, like so as you're going back, and you'll throw the axe out, so it'll hit them and help avoid their incoming damage.
Yeah.
Never used any of those unless it was an accident. Because I don't have like that. When I'm playing a game of this type, avoidance, like blocking or rolling out of the way and stuff is fine. But if you just want me to push backwards or step back or any of that kind of stuff and combo that into throwing out an attack, like I'm just never going to do those because I'm rarely retreating.
Yeah.
I'll roll out of the way or move to dodge something, but I'm going to be right in the thick of things. And so I'm just, my brain just doesn't go that way. And so I didn't unlock any of those abilities till way close to the end, because it got to the point where I'm just like, well, I'll just unlock this stuff because I got all this points to do it.
That's where I was,
And then I would use them occasionally, but not because my brain went and I was like skilled and I was like, oh yeah, now I'm going to do the roll dodge thing and hack them up. No, I would just do it because it happened. It'd be like, oh great, cool, that worked.
Yeah.
But I'm the same way. I would stick to my ones that I really liked, and then I would just basically keep using those, which was another good thing about getting the spear, because that gave me a third thing to cycle through. Because again, like I said, a lot of times things were on cooldowns, or you had to build up a certain level of it before it really hit hard. And so it gave me more things to rotate through that were ready to go. So I did kind of like that. But there was also a couple of other things. So I'm kind of like, I was bummed out by this, but I also understand why they did it. But there were a couple key moves for both the axe. Not so much the Blades of Chaos. I feel like the Blades of Chaos, almost everything that I would use in the 2018's God of War was in this game. But there were a couple key moves or abilities, I guess you could do with the axe, combat moves, that just were not in this game. Like this one where you would be attacking. If you keep spamming R1, it would hit, and then you would like throw the axe, and it would do this spin and hit them, and then you'd catch it, and then if you kept hitting it, it would throw it out again and keep spinning, and it would do this stun damage or freeze damage. That move was not in this game, and that killed me for the first like couple of hours.
Really?
That was my first move. I was like, I've got to unlock this, because I used the mess out of that move in the first game, and it wasn't there, and I was just like, maybe it was too OP, and they like left it for the very end, because at the beginning, you can't see necessarily what's further down. But then once I had unlocked everything, I was like, I was so bummed that move was not there. And I'll be honest, initially it made me use the axe less, because I just didn't have that move that I really liked. And then I was like, okay, I need to break out of this mindset that's, I need to use what they have there and figure out the way to do it. And I would latch onto my one or two moves that would happen there. And something else that wasn't in the first game, at least not from my memory, and I didn't really care for it in this one. I didn't like early on anyways, because I think as you get further down the road, it changes. You unlock abilities where it happens much quicker. But I didn't like, if I wanted to do frost damage, I had to unlock this ability and like activate the axe to go into frost mode and then start fighting. And then the same thing with the blades. I had to like sit there and spin them, and then they would turn into fire mode, and then I would go and fight. I didn't even use that. I hated that completely. Did not like that at all. Now, as you got further down the skill tree, there would be moves where as you're doing damage, your weapons will slowly build up whatever their attribute is. So like frost, or if it's fire. And then there were other ones where that essentially like activating it would happen really fast, like almost instantaneously. So it definitely got better. But early on, I was just like, man. And I think that coupled with feeling a little bit underpowered to the melee damage, and then it's just like it took me a hot minute to kind of really feel like, okay, I've got things rolling. I mean, I was doing fine, but if I got into anything even a little bit dicey, I was like, man, I am just not ready for this. I'm gonna have to bounce, and I have to go level something up or whatever. Whereas in the first game, I felt like I'd come into an area, there's almost no times that it was like, I'm not ready for this. I always felt like, well, I got beat, and I am going to retreat, and I'm going to build up a little bit more. But if I stayed here for another 40 minutes, I bet I could figure out the cadence to beat this person at my current level. Never did I feel like that was the case in this game. I always felt like I've got to get stronger. Yeah.
In the original, I never, kind of just repeating what you were saying, I never felt like, if I was in especially a story area, I felt like I was strong enough to be there, unless I bumped into like a Valkyrie, you know. But as far as just the main story goes, I always felt like they had me at a certain pace, and I was always prepared to be where I was going to be. In the first one, Chris, if you were in a location and wanted to go to another map or world, did you have to go to a portal in order to leave, or could you just back out and leave and go to a portal? Because I didn't remember finding, and you had touched on this a little bit in the podcast, getting around the map as tedious as I did in this one, and that's part of what made me stop. Afterwards, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna hang around in the end game and just keep messing around and finding things and collecting things. Maybe I'll get the plat, but just being able to leave an area, kind of like what you had said, finding my way to that portal to get out, I just found that so tedious. I just kind of stopped.
So from my memory, because when I went back and played in May, I didn't do a lot of endgame stuff. It really was just to redo the story. So when the story was done, I kind of stopped and didn't worry myself too much about doing a bunch of the extra stuff, because I didn't need it, because I did New Game Plus, so I had all my armor and everything, so I didn't need to rebuild up any of that stuff. So I really didn't go off the beaten path very much. I feel like that there was a way that when you unlocked fast travel to go to other areas, you could do it quicker. But I think you still had to go to one of those doors and had to go into the World Tree little area and then wait for the door to appear and then go. So I think all that's the same, but I'm with you. There was in this one, and I think a big part of it is because how large the areas are.
That's
especially
true.
like Vanaheim and stuff. Vanaheim is massive. It does feel like it was just way more cumbersome to get places. And you add on top of that the map, I don't feel like it was the greatest at making it obvious how to get where you wanted to go. You couldn't zoom in super far. You couldn't remove the icons to get a clear view. The map was like three-dimensional in the terms of like, oh, you can tell those are mountains and stuff right there, but it wasn't clear. Like there's a lot of areas in this one where like, oh, it's tunnels and stuff underneath the ground. It's like, I can't tell that. I just know I need to be at this mountain. How do I find where that spot is? It's not until you just stumble across it or look it up that you realize, oh, it's underground. There's nothing that dictates elevation through the map. So I found the map very difficult to navigate when I needed to go somewhere specific. Fortunately, rarely is that a thing in the story. It definitely came up a few times. I'm like, I know I need to go to this door. I don't know how to get to that door. How do I get around this way? But most of the time, story-wise, it was pretty obvious where you need to go, and it just kind of led you to where you needed to be. But in in-game stuff, it got very tedious at times and was fairly problematic for me anyways.
Speaking of things that weren't in the original, we got to play as Atreus this time around.
We did.
Which I enjoyed. I was having fun, especially when he got Ingrid, the sword. And then I was kind of bummed when they just took it away, and you can't I was curious. Oh, in the end game, I wonder how they're going to do it. How maybe I can choose who I play as, and Atreus is just kind of like, peace, I'm bouncing. You're Kratos.
Yeah.
And I was a little bummed that they kind of the opposite of Spider-Man, where when you played as Miles or Mary Jane, it was kind of like, oh, I just want to get out of this and go back to Spider-Man. I was enjoying playing as Atreus.
Yeah.
And then they just kind of like took that away, and I was a little bummed to not be able to do that again.
Yeah, so that was something that, at least in our Discord and for some people in our community, were not liking at all the Atreus sections. I actually really liked all the Atreus stuff. And early on, this is kind of indicative of what we were speaking about with Kratos earlier, I thought I was like, man, I am just destroying these people as Atreus. Because people were like, in the Discord were saying like, oh, it's just... I like playing as Kratos with the axe and the blades and everything, but playing as Atreus, just doing melee with the bow and everything, like, that's just not fun. I was like, I'm having fun because I'm just dismantling these people with no problems. Yeah. So I actually really enjoyed playing as Atreus.
Yeah, I did too.
I'm with you that at the end I thought like, oh, I didn't really know what to expect. I was like, maybe we're going to play as Atreus in Endgame. Maybe you'll just be able to swap out who your companion is. That's what I thought was probably the more likely thing to happen.
Yeah.
I was not expecting Atreus to just be like, and I'm going to go find more giant souls to put in these marbles. Adios.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a little bit different. And it's one of the few things that I feel like where this game ended with question marks. So that's another thing. So initially when 2018 came out, Cory Barlog, who was the game director for the first one, did all these like rounds talking to media and Spoilercast and various things. And he had said like, essentially like, hey, nothing's in stone, but the thought is that we're making a trilogy out of this kind of thing. So once I saw how long this game was, I was like, oh man, that's long. Like, geez. And then as I was playing it, I was like, this is a lot of game. A lot more when you compare to the first one, and like, but then what I was like, maybe this is just going to be it. It's really they shelved the idea of a trilogy. This is going to be it, so it makes sense that it'd be a little bit thicker and meatier and a few more things there because. And I say that because there were definitely a few areas in this game, usually ended up being the Atreus parts, where the game just kind of like I was like, this probably doesn't need to be here. Like, I don't need to be playing this right now. Like this could go away. And it was never like I had problems with stuff like that in The Last of Us Part 2, but I also wasn't enjoying various other aspects of the game, so that made it stand out more. And this one, I would get that sense like, this is a little much. I don't need this right now. I'm ready to get back to, the actual story and not this side kind of stuff. Yeah. But I was still enjoying my time doing the fighting and all that.
Right.
So, case in point, one of the areas. So you at this one point you go to, I think they call it Ironwood. It's Jotunheim essentially.
Just what I was thinking of.
And you meet Angrboda. I think is how you say her name. I always want to call her Angry Bodhi.
Yeah,
but that's not. It's Angrboda or Agrboda or however you want to say it the correct way. And then they have this whole like go off and you go hunt, or not really hunt, but you go kind of like try to stop Angryboda's grandma.
Yeah.
Who's like an actual giant, which I thought was funny because I thought they had established in the first game that giants aren't actually giant. They're just, that's just what you call them. That's like their race, like Asian or Hispanic or something. Like it's not that they're actually all really big. And they even made a joke about it, and Mimir's laughing at Atreus. But then her grandma is like massive. Like she's humongous. Like she's a big fee-fi-fo-fum kind of looking giant. And that whole section, I still don't really know, like, why did we even have to watch that? I mean, other than maybe kind of seeing, like, the torment that Angrboda had to deal with by the fact that she's been rejected by her grandmother. And you do get the scene where they put the soul into the snake, which, based on the stuff that I had found, essentially that's kind of like, that's Jormungandr. So the world serpent. So I was like, okay, that's kind of a cool tie-in how you get that lead into him. But that whole section, I was just like, I don't need this.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, because I thought just as a section to play, like, it was fun. You're the little people and you're in this giant's world, but in the big picture, I was like, I'm kind of done with this. We can move on now at any point. It's cool, but I mean,
before you ever even get to that, you have this section. So you go to Jotunheim with Angrboda. You're kind of learning some stuff. All that's neat. I like learning the stuff about the giants and the little soul marbles and all that's cool.
Yeah.
Then you go out with this yak, and you're riding the yak, and you're grabbing plants or something. And I'm like, I was done with the yak. I was like, all right, when we got back to the camp, I was like, cool, we're done with this yak stuff. Time to go back and go to the main mission. Then that is when you're off to go hunt giant grandma. Yeah. And I'm like, no. I mean, if it would have ended with the yak stuff, and quite frankly, I could have removed the yak stuff. But if it would have ended with the yak stuff, I feel like that would have been like, all right at the right time. I feel like that whole other section was not necessarily needed. I will say that there are other sections that you play as just Atreus, because you go to Asgard twice. You end up going on this hunt for pieces of this mask that you're trying to find for Odin with Thor, and kind of talking with Thor. None of those felt too long to me. No. Those all felt fine. I actually enjoyed learning a little bit more about the story aspects and kind of going and hunting this mask piece. Those were fine. It was really the Jotunheim one was the one that really stuck out to me as like, wow, we really don't need this. We can just kill this off. And then other aspects of the story that I thought were a little long in the tooth. Some of the stuff in Vanaheim, or was it Vanaheim? Is that the one where Freyr and Freya's originally from? Isn't it Vanaheim?
I don't remember
I think that
which.
It is.
Yeah.
And then, you go and you save Freyr, and, we get up on the fly boat and all that kind of stuff. All that, and then the whole Freya, I understand, and I like Freya going and destroying the way in which she's kind of locked out of the realms and all that. Yeah. But all that together is like, this is a little much. We could trim some fat here. We can just pull out some of these things. I understand you want to establish how she's going to break this curse that she has, and I understand you want to establish her and her brother kind of getting back together a little bit and becoming, family again, so to speak. But just all the excess stuff was just a little much. I could have used some trimming there.
The part with the grandmother, and then the part after we got the two dogs to chase the sun and the moon again, I was just kind of like, you could have told us this or whatever. That just kind of felt a little. All right, I wish I think I had messaged it to you in a private message, just kind of like, I wish they had given the Miles treatment to this part where kind of trim some of these things, and I'd have been perfectly fine with it. Yeah.
So story wise, outside of those few aspects that we kind of weren't the biggest fans of, was there anything coming into this game from your memory? Because I know you didn't play it just right like I had. Yeah. Was there anything that you remember that you're like, oh, I remember in the first one, this area or this aspect was kind of a cliffhanger or left unanswered. I kind of am hoping to learn this. Or was there anything you were specifically looking forward to?
Yeah.
That surprised you?
I remembered that Atreus was Loki, kind of like a big reveal at the end. And then as we were getting into it, I remembered, oh yeah, Kratos kind of hung around, pulled the curtain back, and saw that image, the foretelling of him, laying down, and I had totally forgotten that Balder was Freya's son. I was so glad that they kind of included that in the little recap. And I remembered at the end that Thor had shown up at Kratos' doorstep, and that was all I really remembered. So I wasn't sure what to expect. I remembered another kind of a cool thing they showed at the end of the first one was they revealed that Thor's wife was the one that had been leaving the Golden Trail to kind of show them along the way.
Kratos' wife.
Kratos' wife, sorry.
Yeah.
And I was kind of hoping that they would show who was leaving kind of the white glyphs in this one. Kind of like, I wonder who's leading them around this. I don't know if they did reveal that. It went above my head.
That I caught, they did not. And that was one thing in this one. In the first game, it was like, oh, this is like a cool reveal about this thing. Whereas in this one, it's just kind of like, there's just markings everywhere.
Yeah.
It's just what you know, but we're just going to skip on past. We're not going to talk about it because this time we really just need it to be the ways for you to know you can climb this thing. There's no cool story beat tied to that like there was in the first one. So I was with you there when I saw it. I was like, I wonder if they're going to say anything about this. And to my recollection, and that I realized there was never anything said about it, which I mean, I understand because she wouldn't have done it again without it being gold. And then you can't really like reveal it again. Here's this other person who walked every step like that. It wouldn't have hit the way that it did in the first one.
Yeah.
Was there anything from the first game that you can recall that like was unanswered that you were hoping to get an answer to, or anything that
nothing that stood out? Yeah, nothing that stood out. What about, was there for you? Was there something that you were looking for to get an answer on?
There was a couple of things.
Really?
Not a ton, and some of them basically were answered in the sense that I just wanted to learn more. Obviously, I was super interested in Thor, and we knew that he was going to be in this game, and how that's going to tie in. I was really interested to see how it's going to be resolved between Freya and Kratos and Atreus. Like, is she going to be a main villain of the next one, or is it going to get patched up? I was super interested in seeing that. One thing that was a couple of things. They both tie into Jormungandr. So when Jormungandr said like that he looks familiar, I wanted to know how that was tied in. That kind of gets tied in by the fact that he's the one that put the soul of the giant. That's the way that I'm reading it. The soul of the giant into the snake that becomes Jormungandr. So I thought that was kind of cool. But then there was this other story beat in the first one when Atreus kind of comes down with this sickness after he like gets all angry and his fire power comes out and then he passes out. And Kratos rushes over to go to Freya's house. And as they're going up the elevator to go underneath her house to take her in there to hopefully get her to help make him well, the horn that they blow to call Jormungandr gets blown. Yeah. And Kratos looks back, so he's obviously reacting to the fact that he hears the horn. And then Mimir even says, someone's calling the serpent. And he says, and Kratos just kind of acknowledges, like, yep, somebody is. But he doesn't care because he's got his kid. He's really just focused on his kid. They never explain who did that, who blew it, why they blew it, nothing. So I thought there were going to be some answer in this game.
Wow.
And it was not answered anywhere.
Interesting.
Not even touched on. So that's like the biggest mystery from the first game. They're just like, and at this point, like, I know how it all plays out, so it's like it doesn't, I guess, really matter, except that I just want to know who was blowing the horn, who called the serpent, what did they do and or say to the serpent, because at that point in time, as far as you're aware, Mimir's really the only one that can talk to the serpent, because he's speaking a dead language that nobody else knows. Yeah. So I was really hoping that would be answered or something. And also, like you, I was like, at the end of this game, it really looks like that prophecy is saying Kratos is going to die. And then so is he going to die? Like, how's this going to play out? And then, spoiler alert, which is what this is all about, he doesn't die. Yeah. And for a little bit,
shocked by that.
It kind of threw me. They throw, as you get towards the end, they're kind of throwing a lot of stuff at you pretty quickly. So I did have to kind of go back and look at a few things and rewatch a few cutscenes on YouTube and whatnot right after I'd finished the game and like after I'd do a play session, I'd go back and try to find that and rewatch it and be like, okay, how is this going on? Because you feel like he's gonna die.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't die, and then at the end when they find that last mural, he opens it up and you see everything, and then when Atreus leaves, Kratos goes around to the backside of it, and there's another mural, and you open that up, and it's the same thing that was, at least on the far side, is the same mural that was on the rock, except rather than Kratos being there laying on the ground, seemingly dead, with Atreus kind of like screaming out, and then Thor standing over him, that's all been painted over with red and kind of marked out, and then over that is a statue of Kratos, seemingly in reverence, where everybody's like really
bowing down.
And like, I guess you could say worshiping him, or at the very least paying reverence and homage to, like, being the person who did all this stuff for us.
I didn't realize that was the same. The first part was the same painting from The Rock. I didn't realize
it's not super obvious the first time you see it, but when you rewatch it, they go to this angle and you can see the part where Kratos is laying back and down on the ground, and it's painted over with red. And then on the other side, because in the mural, it seems like Thor's going to be the one who kills him, because Thor's like kind of standing above while Kratos is down on the ground. And so it's been painted over with the red, and then the yellow paint used to make the statue of Kratos, and essentially kind of tying in the fact that kind of what Kratos said, but then also Faye kind of going with it as well, that yes, there is this prophecy, but at the end of the day, like, your fate is not necessarily written. You can change it by making better decisions. Kind of like when they went to the Norns, and then in the older games, when we were still in the Greek mythology, whenever he went to the Fates, Kratos went to the Fates. It's like, yes, all this stuff is foretold and all this stuff is said it's going to happen, but if they were saying, like, it's not that we're predicting what you're going to do. It's just that you're going to do exactly what we know you're going to do. Like, it's predictable, so we can just predict what's going to happen, but you do have the ability to change it. And Kratos did all those things by doing like he told Atreus. He became better. He changed. Like, he could have just killed Thor, or, at the very least, like, when he had him beat, he could have just killed him. He could have killed all these people, and he chose not to. He chose to spare him. He chose to be better, and he chose to try to, extend the olive branch, if you will. And he's only fighting because he was defending himself. But he's like, I don't have quarrel with you. I don't have an issue with your daughter. My son is friends with her. Like, this is not what this is about. I'm not going to do this kind of thing. I'm just protecting myself, if you will. And it ends up being Odin that kills Thor. And so those things changing makes it to where obviously Ragnarok ends up happening. All the realms aren't under the fear of Odin and the other gods that were kind of ruling over them and with an iron fist, if you will. Yeah. So I thought that was really cool how they tied that all around, and that you did get the answer that he didn't die. And I will be honest, the first time I go around, I was like, I don't understand how this didn't go that way. I had to kind of put the pieces together, and I totally missed the first time when he opened that door. I saw the Kratos statue and its effect on him, knowing that that's how it turned out. But it wasn't until the second viewing that I realized, it's painted over the original prophecy that
I didn't even see that on the second viewing.
Yeah, but and it's not super. So like the part where you see Kratos laying down on the ground is like by his arm. Like it's if you look for it, you can see it. It's clearly visible. Interesting. Which is one thing that's really cool about this game. And gosh, there's so much stuff that we've kind of skipped over. We'll have to get back to. But there's all these little things that you may not pick up on, but then once certain things happen, if you go back and look at it, things become, it's like, we really did tell you this. We did say that. We did put in obvious things, but you don't pick up on them at the time because you're not expecting the things to be how they go. And then when you go back and look, they're laying the pebbles and putting all the pieces right in front of you, but you're just not necessarily looking for it.
Yeah, I was just like you, where at the end I was confused that Kratos died, and then after the second watch through, I think like 2 or 3 times, totally missed it, them talking about just because it's been prophesied doesn't mean it's going to happen. And I'm like, man, they told me this a couple times, and I just didn't fathom. And then, as to your point that you just mentioned, in the very beginning, when Fenrir passes away, which totally I did not, when Kratos says, what was the spell you said, I didn't even remember that he had said any kind of a spell. And then, I do remember, kind of like the twinkles, or, Fenrir's soul leaving, but then the second time you see one little twinkle go into his
goes
knife.
Into the knife.
Didn't even.
Yeah, it happens, but it's not super in your face. So unless you're really paying attention, you're gonna miss that. Because when they did that, at first I was like, I don't understand. He's stabbing the giant wolf in the head. How is this gonna fix it? And then he goes off, and I was like, oh, he's putting the soul. Oh, because at that point you'd already seen the marble stuff, so you realize you're like, wait a minute. I do recall that when his dog died, Fenrir, that same thing happened. Is like a piece of it must have gone into the knife. I was the same way. I had to go back and watch it because I didn't pick up on it that had actually happened.
Yeah. Did you when Fenrir passed? I don't know. Just as a dog person and a dog owner, man, that hit me. That hit me so. And then when he came back, that hit me all over again. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I had seen some articles. Like I was trying to avoid a bunch of stuff because I didn't want to have anything spoiled. But I'd seen this one article, because I'm looking for news stories for the the podcast. Yeah, and I saw this one article, and the headline said something about, man, this game is just not good to people who are pet people. Like,
really?
A lot, and it had a picture of just him and the dog. And I was like, geez, the dog's.
No.
So I'm just inferring. They didn't say it, but I'm inferring. The dog's gonna die, or we're gonna see a bunch of animals get hurt that you don't want to, even though you're killing all kinds of animals. Evil creatures and whatnot. Yeah. So I kind of was prepared for it a little bit, but I absolutely know what it is that you're talking about and what you mean when you say that. Because it's one of those things where if you're just like the entire first game and even this one to some respect, I know Gabe's like, it's connecting with him on even another level because he's a father of boys and a father who has had a rocky past with his personal father, in his personal life, growing up and kind of thing. So I know all those kind of beats, even though I can sense a lot of them and see them and respect them and have empathy and a few of the things I can kind of feel like from my own experiences, it doesn't hit for me the same way it does there. Sure. Similar situation. I'm sure people that are not really pet people are going to be like, oh yeah, that's sad. Oh, the poor dog. Whereas, people like you and I are over there like, no, but the dog. Right. Absolutely.
I really, and to your point again, where the first one was, easier for Gabe to connect with because he is a father. I felt like this game was easier to connect with for me because it was more of, I have a father, that I, and had, have that connection. And it was easier to go the other way where you're seeing things more from Atreus's point of view, where this time you're dealing with things, not because you have a son, but because you have a father. And things definitely hit me harder this go around between Kratos and Atreus because I am the son this time around. And I thought that was a really cool slight shift they made.
And to kind of tie in with that a little bit, and this is one aspect, this one little spot in particular is a big part of why I'm bummed that Gabe is not on this podcast with us, because he has mentioned something to us in our chat, minus Tim, because Tim hasn't even started the game, so we definitely don't want to be spoiling anything for him. Yeah. But he had mentioned something about like, I'm at this point in the game, I just got to Asgard the first time. He's like, I'm not liking Atreus' attitude or any of this kind of stuff. Like he's all being like, disobedience and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, I really want to unpack that so much with Gabe, because to me, like, I never got that. Like in the first game, yes, like Atreus gets full of himself and starts being a little jerk and just like, I can do whatever I want. And Kratos has got to knock him down a peg or two, kind of thing. In this one, while him and Kratos have a lot of the same contentious aspect in several different ways, we know, because we've seen the other side of the story, we understand he's really doing all this because he's trying to save his dad. And when he would say things like, when Atreus or when Kratos would say like, you need to tell me what's going on and be honest with me, and he'd be like, I need you to trust me. Yeah. There are things that you didn't tell me, and even things now you probably aren't telling me because you need me to trust you and that you're doing things for the right reasons. I need that same thing given to me because I'm doing things. And the whole time is because he saw that prophecy wall. He thinks Kratos is going to die, so he's trying to do anything he can to make it to where Kratos doesn't die. Whereas in the first game, he's just being a little garbage piece of a kid, He's like just he's just being like a kid. Exactly. Yeah, he's being a kid that's just being rebellious and kind of wanting to do his own thing, thinking he knows better. Whereas this one, the difference is at least from his perspective, he actually does know better because he doesn't know that until later on you find out Kratos had actually seen that piece of the wall, but he had no idea. So he's trying to be his dad's savior, whereas in prior, it was the other way around kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I want to hear Gabe expound upon that so much and see and maybe by the time he gets to the end of the game, his opinion will change on that. But I just want to ask him so bad, explain what you mean, because I thought I really dug the way that Atreus was handled and the way he carried himself and everything he did in this game. I feel like, of course, this is kind of an obvious statement because he's older and a little bit wiser, but I feel like he had his head on right the whole game. Of course, he's still getting deceived and there's pieces of the puzzle he doesn't see. But I feel like with the information he has at hand, he made a lot of great decisions. Mm-hmm. Whereas the first game, he's a young kid and he's not making any good decisions. He's making he's just doing stuff just to do it because he thinks, I'm a god, I can do what I want.
Right.
All this kind of stuff. So I thought that was cool that in this one, he really, he felt really smart to me. I felt like he was making the best moves that he could with the information that he had at his hand.
I really wish at the Game Awards that Atreus, Sonny, whatever his name is, would have won over Kratos. Mm-hmm. Because I feel, Christopher Judge has a great voice, but the performance, and it's not just him, it's directing and the writing, it seems fairly one note to me, maybe two. He's either being very serious or shouting, Atreus, no! Where I felt like Atreus got to really just ride an emotional roller coaster and just all over the place. And I really was a little bummed that he didn't get a little more recognition. It's good to be nominated, but I felt like he did such a good job. He had to go through a lot and play a lot. And, and so I definitely props to that little guy. I
had seen, of course, I don't have it pulled up at the moment, but I had also seen a lot of talk about people who were like, man, I wish the actress who voiced Freya would have been nominated too.
Yes. Yeah. There were so many wonderful performances in this. And maybe if they'd had a supporting role, then maybe Atreus or Freya would have gotten a nod. But there were so many performances. Thor and Odin were so much fun. When they were on the screen, I just loved it. The guy that played Odin was such a delight to watch.
So real quick, Danielle Nicole Bisutti, I want to make sure I'm giving her a proper shout out because I know what she looks like. I know her face, but I was like, why can't I think of what her name is? And clearly I'm butchering her last name. But yeah, so let's transition now into the new people that we got to see and a few more things. So I'm with you. I initially did not like Odin at all. Yeah. Like so the introduction of being introduced to Thor and Odin, I thought was cool how it was a callback to that dream sequence that you have at the end of the first game, kind of in the post game of the first game. Mm-hmm. I thought that was really cool that it was essentially the same thing, and then you just get to see where that picks up when he actually goes inside. Yeah. I thought that whole exchange was cool, and then Odin shows up, and it's not as though I was expecting him to be bigger or more menacing than Thor. I mean, I expected him to be a smaller guy and all that kind of stuff, but I don't know, the minute he started speaking, no disrespect by any means to the actor or anything like that, but it just wasn't in my head what I thought. I was like, this is Odin, who you've spent the entire last game hyping up as this big menacing, right? Not menacing necessarily in like size, gargantuan size so much, but just like all father, all the knowledge. Like, it just didn't feel intimidating to me, and I didn't even get the sense of like, oh man, you're a slimy guy. Like, oh my gosh, like I just got like, this just seems like someone you just walk across the street and like, oh, there's a person trying to sell me another sword hilt. Nah, quit bugging me today, guy. Yeah. I just was not impressed with Odin at all initially. Thor, absolutely. I loved his character design. I loved the voice. I loved all that stuff. I thought that was a great, really awesome take on Thor. But then somewhere along the way, I can't put my finger on exactly when it happened. Maybe it was the first time we get to Asgard, because I know you don't deal with Thor Odin a ton before that. But I really came around on Odin. Yeah, I really enjoyed the way that the actor, and I'm blanking on all these names.
I want to say
he was
Richard
on like
Schiff,
West Wing or something,
Schiff?
wasn't he?
Yeah, he was in the West Wing.
He's done a lot of stuff. Right. But yeah, I did enjoy his take on it and how he was doing it. And when you know and I don't know a ton about Norse mythology, but one of the things
Yeah.
that I do know about Odin from the game and from my little bits that I have explored about Norse after the first game, his whole like crux is he wants knowledge. He just wants knowledge. He wants to know as much as he can, know everything. He wants to be able to prevent Ragnarok and prevent his death, and he needs all this knowledge to figure out how best to do that kind of thing. So when I saw how they were playing Odin, I was like, oh man, like you can see the manipulation and the conniving and all that kinds of stuff. And I started to really appreciate the way that he was being presented with this actor and his look. Because when I wanted someone that was kind of intimidating in some respect, it made more sense the more that I played it. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm more intimidated by him not knowing what I can trust than I am if he was kind of brooding and like this big, huge presence kind of thing. So that was me coming around to realizing, oh, the way that I wanted it was absolutely wrong. They made the right decision. This is played correctly. They got the right guy, the right voice, all that kinds of stuff. I absolutely came around on all that kinds of stuff.
How much of what he told Atreus do you think was true as far as, do you think that is actually how he lost his eye? Did he really want the mask? Is that what he wanted the mask for, to know what was on the other side for him?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do think that he wanted to know, like, as far as if that's how he lost his eye, I don't know. But I mean, I think it's a cool story. And the fact that he like wouldn't let Atreus look in without makes me think that there's some validity to that. And the fact that they changed Mimir's story and how he is the way that he is a little bit, I don't think that it would work, because he basically, in the Norse mythology, if I'm remembering correctly, he basically plucks out his own eye so that he can get information and drink from Mimir's well, where all this knowledge comes from.
Like
really? That was his trade, so that he could drink from that and get all that knowledge. So since they didn't have that aspect, I like that there was a different reason for why he was missing an eye. I do think that he wanted to get in whatever little bit that he got from there, knowing that there's knowledge, and the fact that Loki could sense like, oh, there's like knowledge or truth behind this. I do think, knowing Odin's character of just wanting as much knowledge as he can, I believe that he truly did think that I need what's behind here. I need this mask to be complete, and this kid can help me get there. And absolutely, the minute this kid gives me what it is, I think I'll just get rid of him. Like, he's just expendable. I just want the knowledge. So I feel like all of that was legitimate, but clearly, like the rest of the time, saying, oh, you're free to go. You can do whatever you want. You're not a prisoner here and everything. Like, he wasn't. But the whole time, Odin just was pulling the puppet strings and making him do what he wanted to do, kind of thing. He was not at all of his own free will. He was being controlled, even though he didn't realize that he was, kind of thing.
A lot of times, especially during a boss fight, I'm so focused on the fighting and what's on cooldown, whatever. I don't hear a lot of what is said during the fight. Did you pick up on the final fight with Thor? And I can't remember now if it was his wife or his daughter. Just because of the time we live in and current events, some phrases stick out to me. And Thor, it's either his wife or his daughter. He says, "You keep my wife's name out of your mouth." And I was
like, I didn't catch on that.
Did they put that in after? Was it just a coincidence that, of course, now we all think of Will Smith, but as soon as he said it, I was like, how did I miss that the first time? And when did they put that in?
I did not catch that. That's kind of crazy. Which, by the way, I really liked his daughter's character. Did think it was a little weird that she warmed up to Atreus way faster, considering that Atreus and Kratos basically killed both of her brothers. I was like, well, you're really kind of warming up to Atreus pretty quickly here. But outside of that, I really liked her character. And I didn't know Thor had a daughter. So I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. And then I liked that it seemed like her and Atreus were kind of getting along and whatnot. So I enjoyed that interaction. Thor's wife, thought it was kind of crazy how she just really kind of just flipped the script pretty quickly at the end. So that makes me think that like maybe that was all on a front to begin time. She just wanted to get out of this, but she had to put on the front of I'm the good Aesir and all this kinds of stuff. So I thought that was interesting how they did that. Yeah. So I guess the kind of the last big thing that we need to get to is Tyr, which you find early. You kind of free him from his prison, if you will, early in the game, and then he's with you back at the hub, which is Sindri's house for this game for the vast majority of the game.
Yeah.
Just he goes out on one mission with you when you go to Alfheim. I believe after you free him, you get back to Sindri's house, you go to Alfheim one time, he goes with you, but he pretty much doesn't ever go out on another mission or anything with you. And what did you think about the whole tier thing? And you can lead into the twist of the tier thing, and what were your thoughts on all that stuff?
Yeah, and what's funny is that upon the second watching, I was really looking anytime tier was on the screen to see if there's any kind of a hint they drop, just the smallest little nod or wink. I didn't pick up on anything.
No.
As far as a hint, or because of course you don't want to play your hand, but I thought, man, is someone going to say something that he'll have a reaction to, or just a look? I didn't see anything, man. They didn't give me a hint at all. It was Sarah was in the room with me when I was watching the second time, and it floored her, and she had only watched the last 3.5 hours of this video I was watching. It was a cool twist. I really liked it. It made me all the more happy that I stuck around in the end game long enough to free Tyr, the actual Tyr, from his prison. So that was kind of cool to see. I did wonder if Tyr was always Odin from the get, or at some point did Odin swap him out and put him in this other prison where we found him. I'm not sure, if Tyr was always Odin, or if at some point there was some sort of a switch just because we left him behind so often. But I thought it was fun. I enjoyed it.
So this was the one aspect for me that the game that got spoiled.
Really?
Pretty early on. I was looking up some video on how to get past some stupid puzzle.
Yep. I remember you warning me.
And I finished the video. When you finish the video, there's other videos down below that you can, suggested videos, like as this one's finishing out, not necessarily the ones that pop up on the screen, because sometimes that happens too. But this video I was watching, some of them, like, they kind of explain the puzzle, but then other ones, like, they just, like, I just need, like, a do this, do this, do this. Like, if I need to figure it out, I would just stay in the game and figure it out. It's like, I'm trying to progress here. I'm trying to finish out this thing, this one stupid, squishy, throw the axe through the puzzles. Annoy the crap out of me. So I was like, oh, come on. So I saw these other ones. I was like, okay, I think I know what this one's happened, but I'm just going to check out a couple of these other ones to see if they're more clear on what needs to happen. And then I saw one, and it was Tyr sitting on the ground, which from the thumbnail just looked like when you find him in that room.
Yep.
But I happened to read the title, and it said something about, I don't remember exactly, but it said something about the real Tyr or something like that. And I was like, and I scrolled away real quick, and I was like, but I thought about it. And I was like, I bet this is a fake Tyr. This is Odin. So I didn't expressly tell me, but I was able to, just from that one little reading that sentence, surmise. Because even again, from the picture, wasn't obvious. Because when you actually find him and save him, he's in the big, the frozen area, and it's all like cold. And from my memory, I was like, this does not at all look like the area that was on that thumbnail. It looked like the warmer tones of the mine where you actually find him. Yep. So from the picture, I wouldn't have gotten it. It's just the way that the headline was worded made me think, I think this I think this Tyr is not real. And my only thing that I can think is that it's Odin. Now, there are some things that he does that I knew. Now that I knew this, really? I was kind of trying to pay, or I didn't know it, but surmised it. I was paying more attention to various things, and you put some pieces together. So one thing, and this I actually didn't know until I was watching some stuff after the game, because I didn't have, this is one of the times when I didn't have subtitles on. Usually I do, but I didn't this time. But when you're playing the game, if you have subtitles on, it spells his name Tyr. But after the game, when you find the real Tyr, it's T, and there's an accent on the Y and the R, so that you can tell that from visually, you can tell like the real Tyr has the accent, the fake Tyr doesn't. Of course, I wouldn't have picked up on that more than likely, even if I had subtitles on, but I didn't at all, so I didn't see that. Something else that they say is at one point, whenever Freya goes back there with you, Tyr refers to her as Frigg at one point. Yeah. And that nobody ever called her that except for Odin.
Oh.
So everybody else calls her
Interesting.
Freya. That was like a thing that he called her. And I don't remember what her response to that was, like if she picked up on it. I don't remember being super obvious, but I remember picking up on that, like, oh, that's different. Nobody's ever called her that.
Interesting. It totally
And
went over my
then
head.
there was one other scene, or there was some scene where I think it was Sindri or somebody makes mention of, oh yeah, Tyr, he slept in the broom closet, or he slept in the closet, or whatever like that. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's kind of crazy or whatever. But that closet is the same one where Odin escapes out of and appears. So he was probably going into there when he was sleeping, and that's when he was going back to go doing his Odin-y stuff.
Interesting.
So there was a couple little things like that when they had saved him and they took him into that area where you're seeing behind the shrine, you're seeing the big prophecy thing and the big sand world is what I would call it. And watching it, he makes mention of something. I don't remember his exact line, but he basically says something like, no, I'm not going to let that happen, or something like that. And then he starts going down as like, no, I'm not going to do war. I'm a pacifist and all this kinds of stuff like that. But it was like, that's kind of odd. And by this point, I'm thinking he's not really Tyr. So I'm like, I wonder if he's being so pacifist about this because he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. Because again, Odin's trying to prevent his own death in Ragnarok the whole time.
Right.
So little things like that where I was like, I wasn't sure until I got to the end of the game that I was like, okay, some of these pieces do line up. Other things may have just been me grabbing at straws because I already was suspicious of the fact that he was gone. So
interesting.
When the twist happens and he kills Brock or stabs Brock, of course at the time you don't know if he's going to die or not.
Yep.
What did you like the whole Brock death thing? Like what? Talk about that from your perspective. Like
I mean,
that
I
hit.
did not expect it at all, and I loved Brock and Sindri before, but man, just the whole backstory of Sindri bringing Brock back to life and Brock not having a soul and all that just made it so deep. And again, Sarah was with me watching the replay, and she just couldn't believe watching this. And then she said, how do they know each other? And I said, they're brothers. And that just made it, she audibly gasped and was like, oh no, and just amplified just the, kind of again, I wish Gabe was here because I don't remember what conversation it was in, but I remember Gabe saying that Brock was his favorite character.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, well, don't get too close to him.
Yeah, from the last point that we talked to him about where he was in the game, like he's not gotten to that sequence yet. So I'm kind of interested. And coupled that with because I'm the same as you. I mean, I love Brock and Sindri. They're dynamic. Them when they were individual, once they mended their relationship and got back together, the back and forth between the two of them. Brock is absolutely very brash, but I feel like most people have a person like that in their life where they're like, oh my gosh, you just kind of like, you feel like at times like I just can't with how this person's doing this, but at the same time you can't help but just find that a bit endearing the way that they're doing things and know that they'll at the end of the day they're going to be there for you kind of thing. And I just personally find a lot of his lines and things funny. So when they went to go create the spear, and I wasn't right away putting two and two together with why Sindri was so anti. I know I need to go talk to the lady, which ends up being this mermaid cat person. I don't know exactly how you say what it is.
The Forge, was that it?
Yeah. But I thought it was so cool how when you get there and then Mimir mentions the line about like, oh, she doesn't see you or she's not acknowledging you because you don't have a soul. Which he didn't say it that way. He's like, seems like she'd only be talking to someone, and he kind of puts two and two together of what that's all about. And honestly, like you were mentioning before, about the moment with Fenrir and as being a dog owner and all this kinds of stuff. But I think for this game, that moment of him asking her to bless that spear, not acknowledging it, having Mimir kind of say that throwaway line, so to speak, just kind of speaking out loud, him putting the things together, and then Kratos kind of, and I don't know for sure, I'd have to rewatch it because I haven't, kind of picking up on the situation and what's going on, and not knowing the specifics of that he doesn't have a soul, but saying, no, you can bless it, and then getting down to his level and doing that, like the respect in that moment, and then hearing Brock do that, because he's thinking, has always thought he's probably, other than in making his weapons and kind of he talks a big game, but always had this sense that he feels a little inferior. Mm-hmm. And then like he's the guy that's turned blue from all this stuff, and like just all these things about him that he's probably putting on a front. And to have Kratos bend down and respect him that way and ask him to bless it, and then giving that, like, that moment, I had to stop playing. I had to finish it, and then I had to go to the menu for a minute, because that moment hit me harder in this game than almost any moment. And I had the whole Fenrir dog thing and all these kinds of things too, but I loved that moment. So when the Brock stabbing happened, and I'm like, all right, Freya, keep doing your widdly hoos and make the sparkles come out your finger. Make him bring him homeboy back. Yeah. And then when he didn't, and then he says the line, he's like, I know what you did to Sindri. He's like, and I forgive you on that. Man, again, just kills me, because there's no, he doesn't get it. Like, this is the end of the road for Brock. Mm-hmm. And there was always going to be an end of the road, but to have it be premature because of what Sindri did, and it was selfish what Sindri did. But to have Brock, the brash, tell it like it is, say, hey, I understand, and no hard feelings, I forgive you, and everything like that. That hit hard. And then for him to die, and then the whole flip on Sindri. Like, I understand Sindri's everything he went through at the end of the game, but I just have to say I hate it so much. I hate all of his just animosity now, and his flip of character, and being dirty and filthy and having blood and stuff on him and not caring, and hating all of the group, like Kratos and Atreus and everybody now. Yeah. Again, I don't hate it from the aspect of like I'm mad at the developers for doing it or telling the story that way. I just want to be clear, because there's other games where I have hated their choices. Right. But I just, man, it just cuts me like a knife that the game ends with him with not knowing what that situation is. And that kind of leading back to originally, was there things that you didn't, that didn't from the first game? Like, that's one from this game that I was like, it makes me think, okay, well, there's clearly going to be more in this story. One, because Atreus just bounces, and we don't really know what's going to end up happening with him. And then two, this was the first time I thought, like, maybe they're going to have DLC for this game, because there has to be some reconciliation, even if it's it's never going to work out. Yeah. This is the end of the road. Like, it's never definitively said. There's just this tension, and then he just goes into disappears, like literally, in his with his dwarf magic. And I'm just like, I hate how it ends. I just hate not having an answer and there not being some type of reconciliation. And again, I know, like, that's life. That's how life goes. Like, and sometimes there can't be reconciliation, and things are going to end the way that they end. But it's just, it's like this nagging in my soul. It's just like, I just want there to be, even if it's not like happy ending. I can understand that, but just to have just walk off, no final word, it eats at me, man. It eats at me.
I mean, we've all lost people, and then we've all had friends who have lost people, and we've seen people be in that point of their life, and we always, that's when you want to have the words to say that brings them out of it, and we know that there are no words. They just, only time can take that, and can this too shall pass. And I'm just like you. Sarah said at one point, why is he still so angry? And I was like, because he's still going through the loss that he just went, it just happened, and he's probably going to be there for a while. But I'm just like you, because we've all been there, and we've all had loved ones that have been in that spot. I hate for anyone to be in where Sindri is at the end of the game. And like you, I want to have a 6 months later, or a 2 years later, or however long it takes for him to be able to be good again, or close to good, or better than he was. Yeah. Same.
Because it's like, I liked seeing him go through this is going to be a weird way to phrase this, but I liked seeing him go through the torment of losing Brock. I liked seeing the change in his character of, like, he's all dirty and everything, and he's not caring, because the most important thing at that moment, his family was gone. But what I really wanted, and again, they're going to handle it how they handle it, whether it comes up in whatever the next story is, or we get like some kind of DLC or something that helps wrap this up. Maybe we never get anything. I don't just like the fact that I still don't know who blew the horn and called Jormungandr. Maybe we won't get an ending. But what I really wanted was to see him go through this, and then I wanted him to see, like, maybe at the funeral, which I'm assuming did you see the funeral?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So it's one, because it's in the end game. It's one of the just optional things that you can just stumble across. There is some characters that mention like, hey, we're going to have a funeral for Brock, but it's not like a thing you have to do. Kind of like going back to the house at the end of the first game and having the dream where Thor shows up.
Yeah.
But I went to the funeral, and Sindri shows up, and they send the boat out, and they shoot out the fire arrow, and Sindri's there. What I wanted to have happen was him to realize and say, like, yes, this sucks. Yes, I lost my brother and he was my only real family, but I've realized he's not my only family. You guys are my family too. And that's the other dwarves that were there. That's Kratos. Of course, at that moment, Atreus isn't there in the story. Would have been nice if he was.
I wish he would have been there.
Yeah, I feel like that's what I wanted. That's the ending I wanted it to be. And that's not to say that he couldn't say, but I still need time alone. But that would have been like, okay, but there's...
Yeah.
I understand where the situation is. Being left on there's no resolution. It just eats at me, and I'm dying for something to be done somewhere down the road. I've never wanted DLC for a game more than this one, but to resolve the story aspects, not because just because I want to play more of the game, because I was enjoying the game, the gameplay aspect of it. But yeah.
Do you know? Because I don't. You had mentioned that Cory Barlog had said that. This was part of a trilogy when the original came out. Has he said since then, no, this is the final one? Has he mentioned that at all, or this is a trilogy still?
He hasn't made any rounds and everything because a different person directed this game, even though Cory was like the overall kind of guy, like managing the project. But that guy's done several spoiler casts and made some rounds. And I've not watched all of them, but I've watched a handful of them, and I feel like, I don't remember what his specific wording was, but I feel like he said something about when they were talking about making the game, about how, like, oh, we realized, like, that this is going to be the end of the story. This is the end of the Norse saga, if you will. Okay. So I feel like this is the end. Now, he may, and he did make mention, he said, in one of the spoiler casts, he was saying, like, once you find the real Tyr, and then as you're going around the world, like the real Tyr, you just run into him. He's at different areas looking at various things and doing stuff. Yeah. And he said at each of those locations, he's either sitting in a different pose or he's doing something. Like in one area, you go into him, you find him in Vanaheim, and he's like doing what almost looks like yoga, or like, not yoga, but what is it, like Tai Chi or something? You kind of like doing these like motions, but like in a meditative state kind of thing. And then you go in other ones and he's sitting, but he's sitting in what's almost similar to like a meditation pose. And then you go to other ones where it does look like he's doing something that's almost like a yoga move of some sort. And he's saying, if you see where when you run into Tyr, if you really pay attention, all of the things that he's doing all are hints to what the possible next chapter of this thing's going to be. Like what mythology maybe they're going to go to or whatever. Like he didn't get any super specifics, but he did make mention of that when he started out to make this game. Cory said, okay, you're going to take over the direction of this game. He's like, and I'm only going to give you 3 things that have to happen. He's like, Ragnarok has to happen. Odin, I think he said Odin. No, Brock had to die.
Wow.
Which he knew that. He's like, Brock has to die. And there was one other thing. Oh, he said Atreus has to leave at the end. He's like, these are the 3 things that Cory Barlog says. These 3 things have to be done in the game. He's like, but the rest of it, go and figure it out.
I thought in some point in the game they had said Ragnarok wasn't a person, but kind of like an event. But wasn't that like the big monster that was wasn't that Ragnarok?
Yeah, no. So Ragnarok is Ragnarok essentially, if you want to, not if you were like verbatim translate it out, but essentially Ragnarok is equivalent to the word apocalypse.
Right.
So, but the guy who's at the end, that's Surtur, who they stab the swords into, and he falls down there. And he would always say, I am Ragnarok, because essentially when Ragnarok happens, he shows up and destroys Asgard. Like he's the main thing because he plunges his sword into Asgard and destroys it all. So he even says the line, "I am Ragnarok," but it's not that the person is.
Okay.
Ragnarok is the event.
That's what I thought. Okay.
But the event happening brings Surtur, who destroys Asgard. So essentially, like in the Marvel movies, when you watch Thor Ragnarok, Surtur shows up at the end of that, and he's like, "I am Asgard's doom." It's kind of the same thing.
Okay.
But in this game, he was saying, "I am Ragnarok." Not like that was his name. He was just basically saying, "I'm the embodiment of this event happening," kind of thing. So,
can we just real quick here? I wanted to throw in, we had mentioned parts that we thought, it could have been trimmed. We didn't really need that.
Sure, yeah.
There is a part that probably could have been trimmed, was not necessary, but man, I had so much fun in that bar fight. with Thor.
That
was so much fun.
I am totally with you. Like that was, I mean, I guess you could say it showed the whole between him and his daughter. Like,
right.
You promised you wouldn't. Like you could say some relationshipy building stuff. But yeah, I'm with you. That did not need to be there at all. But it was way more fun than riding around on the yak.
Yes.
And chasing your grandma.
Yes.
And trying to break her bowl.
Right.
Yes, I agree with you. If it's gonna be there, at least you can mindlessly turn off and be like, but I'm gonna have some fun beating up some undead kind of.
And it wasn't that long.
Soldiers. Yeah, especially compared to the other stuff.
Right.
Yeah. I'm with you there too. That was something that I was happy to do, even though in the back of my head I was like, we really didn't need this.
So at the end of the day, Chris, how do you feel about this one compared to the first one? Do you like it as much? If you could go back in time and remember after you finished the first one, can you compare the two?
I think I still enjoy the first one better.
Yeah.
That's not to say that I dislike this one. I feel like it really is. I still feel like that's probably the best way to put it. This is really like a volume 1 and a volume 2. They're one story. The both pieces need to be there to tell the story. But the first one, I feel like had a little bit of that Miles to it, where it's like it felt the right length. Everything felt right. All the story beats, all the stuff. You did have to backtrack, and you did end up going back to areas at certain times, but they all felt like they make sense. They didn't feel like fluff. It went at a good pace, whereas this game had a few pacing issues, I think, at certain points. There's also, as a person who's played God of War from way back from the first one.
Oh, wow, right.
There's things about the first one, like the reveal of the Blaze of Chaos. That's not going to be beat.
Yeah.
In this one, it couldn't be beaten. That was just such a cool moment. So I really, really enjoyed that aspect of it. And this, the fact that it being the first of the soft reboot, if you will, like this whole new version of Kratos and the way that the game is played, all those elements just elevate it over the first one for me personally.
Yeah.
But I already know that these two games are going to be up there in my list of the first one already was, but then you add this one with it, they're going to be in my top 10 list easily of favorite games of all time kind of thing. And I'm already, it's not going to be now, but I'm already like anticipating, okay, when am I going to go back and do my replay and really just focus on the story of this one? It'll probably be after they drop New Game Plus at some point next year or 2025, or 2024, I guess. Because there'll be other things I want to play, but I'm going to be replaying this game. And I think at some point I'll probably replay the other one as well. I mean, I feel like these will be something that I revisit ever so often, kind of like The Last of Us. I mean, I've played the original Last of Us 3 or 4 times, and I haven't bought The Last of Us Part 1, the new remake of it,
right.
But I'm going to at some point, and then I'm going to play that again. It's going to be one of those games where I am going to jump back. But if you put a gun up to my head and said, you got to choose one, I'd probably choose the first one, but it would be like, it's really more like a 1A and 1B. It's not like a easily 1 and 2 kind of thing for me.
10 years down the road, when we talk about favorite games of all time and you say God of War, will that include both of them as one, like a Kill Bill 1 and 2 together?
I feel like that's the way that I would want to play it, but I feel like whenever we have those conversations, we don't allow that. So it probably would be like wherever they fall on the list, it would be this one's this number and this one's the number directly below it. But where I would want is to be like a 1A, 1B or whatever, or I would want to loop them together. Because to me, it's just not, it's not fair. To use another example, like Infinity War and Endgame, like it feels like you can't. The one ends, it doesn't feel like a period. It feels like an ellipsis.
Yeah.
And you could kind of say 2018 does feel like a period because you did complete the task, but it's very obvious that there's more to come and that you've been hearing about all these characters and Odin and all these other threats. It's like it just doesn't feel like a period. It feels like an ellipsis.
Yeah.
So to me, that makes them go together. Whereas like a Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, and 3, like they all feel distinctly different. Like they're their own story, and they don't necessarily like pick up directly where the other one left off, kind of thing. Like I just feel like it's if any game you could make that decision or make that kind of case, and I think there's probably a handful where you could. This is definitely one of the series where I feel like these two games you could say like they really belong together as one entity rather than a part 1 and part 2 or something.
Wasn't the Lord of the Rings originally all one book, and then we broke it into Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, Return of the King?
I believe when he was writing it, it was thought of like that, and then they were like, "This is just." The publishers were like, "This is too long.
Okay,
we've got to break this up a little bit." And so he did break it up into 3. And then I remember hearing or watching a documentary or something on some interview where they were saying, "Yeah, and the publisher's the one who chose the title for the last one. At least may have helped with the other 2, but
really." And
Tolkien was really upset about that. He's like, I don't want to call it the Return of the King. You're spoiling what happens. Like, why are we doing that? I don't want to call it that kind of thing. So yeah, there's definitely some things about that probably were not his preference, but ended up being that way.
No, this is a fun game. I was really, really happy with it. I think I liked the gameplay of the first game way more, and I think I liked. And it might be because it's fresher in my mind. I think I liked the story and the cutscenes of this one more. But like you say, it could just be one game because they don't. Like a lot of times, sequels will really remember this part and remember that part. Where this one, it just kind of seamlessly, like you were saying, they don't. You feel like you don't need to because it is part of the same story. You don't have to. Consistently remind people of what happened because it just happened.
Yeah, it's a good game. I mean, it's probably, which I haven't played a ton this year, but it's easily my game of the year. I didn't play Elden Ring, so I can't.
But you played Horizon.
I did play Horizon, but this and while I really enjoyed that game, and am gonna play the recently announced DLC for that game. Whenever it finally drops. But this story's the two together. Like it's just a really special story. And it's so crazy because I feel like I said this when we were talking after 2018 came out too. It's like the God of War games, the mainline games, 1, 2, and 3, there's a ton of other little sub games like they were on the PSP and various other things as well that all are canonical and tie into the lore. But they were fun games, but they were really like mindless, just like mindless games. I mean, they were just hack and slash. You just do the thing, and that's it. There was no real. I mean, there was a story to it. There was a story happening, but it was a one note. Just angry Kratos going to kill all these people. Like it's just what it was. There was very few elements of like, oh my gosh. I mean, it was kind of sad when you learned that he got tricked into killing his own family, and that's why his skin is white, because it's their ashes on his being cursed to be on his body. Like there's definitely story aspects that are cool in it, but for the most part it was just very one note, and it's like I never would have thought they could have redeemed Kratos and his story and made it something to where I'm over here thinking in my head like, shoot, is this one of the best video game stories ever told kind of thing. And it totally is. And so it's just I'm blown away with what they've been able to do with it. And part of me is almost like, shoot, regardless of what they do next, if they go to a different pantheon or whatever, it's like, man, maybe we should just end on the highest of high notes. You know, I kind of don't like that because I've got these questions that I need answered, would like answered. But it's like, shoot, man, I really hate it when things like you think like they just go right past their step. Like the Rams won the Super Bowl last year, the LA Rams, and there was this player on the team that he had said, I think he had said in interviews and stuff like, if we win a Super Bowl, I'm retiring. Like he's already he's played for a really long time, and they win the Super Bowl, and then this year starts up, and he's like, I'm coming back. He's like, I got that feeling of, seeing the confetti and like I have it and I just want to go for it. And you would think because they were just the Super Bowl winners, like they'd be right there in the thick of things. And they've had a bad season. Oh, and no. They're probably not, I mean, you don't know. It might happen, but they're probably not going back to the Super Bowl. And it's just like, if he quits after this year, it's like, man, it would have been nice to just go out on the high note. And it's like, I don't ever like it when things or people or anything like, they get a little greedy and stay one pass. It's like when you're playing poker and you got the hot hand and you stay one too many games. It's like, you should have just left. I always kind of root for that. But at the same time, the selfishness in me is like, but do it again. Do some more.
I've really enjoyed watching they'll have like little featurettes on like the PlayStation Home that you can watch on God of War, which hints at, hopefully means that I'd love to see a documentary about the making of this game, just like they did with the last one, because I want more. I want to find out more about it.
Yeah. It would be awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that is our spoiler cast.
Look at that.
For God of War Ragnarok. Hopefully, whatever the next game is, which I don't know what it'll be, hopefully it can be all four of us at it again, like it was with The Last of Us. But this was a good time, Ed. I'm glad we finally got to really chat about it a lot rather than just a few text messages here and there.
Yes,
trying to cram everything you want to talk about in text messages. Like, no, we just need to hash this out, man. Come on, Gabe, finish it up. You're not going to? Okay, fine. We're doing it.
We gotta go.
Yeah, absolutely.